Let's talk about what really happens when you stop caring about your avoidant ex. Because this isn't just about letting go of a relationship. It's about reclaiming something far more valuable, your emotional power and your peace. Now, if you've ever been entangled with someone who has an avoidant attachment style, you already know how exhausting it is. One minute they're pulling you close, the next they're retreating without explanation. You're stuck trying to decode silence, overanalyzing texts, bracing for emotional withdrawal like it's the next wave. And you might even start to think that you're the problem. That if you were just a little less needy, a little more patient, they'd finally choose you the way you're choosing them. But here's the truth. What you're experiencing isn't love. It's a psychological loop. It's intermittent reinforcement, a concept from behavioral psychology. You're being rewarded inconsistently. Affection here, coldness there, and your brain starts chasing validation the way a gambler chases a win. It's the uncertainty that keeps you hooked, not compatibility, not connection, uncertainty. And that's where the trap is. When you care deeply about someone who is emotionally unavailable, you hand them the remote control to your nervous system. Your joy, your sense of worth, your peace, it becomes contingent on whether or not they feel like showing up that day. And the more you try to get closer to someone avoidant, the more they recoil. It's not personal. It's a pattern. But understanding that doesn't always make it easier to break. So what happens when you stop caring? First, there's this moment. Sometimes quiet, sometimes explosive, where something inside of you just breaks. You're no longer willing to beg for scraps. You stop trying to fix things that were never yours to fix. And what you're really doing in that moment is reclaiming your emotional authority. You're saying, I will no longer outsource my peace to someone who doesn't know how to hold space for it. This isn't detachment in a cold or bitter sense. This is detachment in the most profound spiritual sense. The Stoics called it apatheia, not apathy, but freedom from being enslaved by external chaos. It's not that you don't feel anything. It's that you no longer allow someone else's emotional inconsistency to dictate the temperature of your soul. When you stop caring, the nervous system calms down. The obsessive thoughts begin to dissolve. You begin to remember who you were before your self-worth got entangled with someone else's avoidance. And that's the key shift from reaction to reflection. You're not reacting to their texts or silence anymore. You're reflecting on what you want, what you value, and what you will never settle for again. And something really powerful happens here. You start to see where your power has been leaking. Every time you compromised your needs to keep them comfortable. Every time you suppressed your voice to avoid pushing them away. Every time you told yourself to wait, to hope, to be more understanding, while they stayed emotionally unavailable and you stayed emotionally malnourished. Reclaiming your power means ending that cycle. It means realizing that caring for someone doesn't require you to abandon yourself. It means understanding that love, real, secure, grounded love, never requires you to diminish your emotional needs to maintain someone else's comfort zone. Now, let's get real. Stopping the caring doesn't happen all at once. It's a slow, sometimes painful unraveling of illusions. But every step you take away from that entanglement is a step towards sovereignty, emotional sovereignty. And that's not just some feel-good phrase. That's the foundation of a life where you are in charge of your peace, your clarity, your direction. So if you're in that place where it feels like caring about them is costing you your sanity, listen to that voice, the one that's quietly saying enough. Because when you stop caring, you're not giving up on love. You're giving up on the version of love that required you to suffer. And that is the beginning of freedom. Here's the bottom line. You can't force someone to show up, but you can choose to stop waiting. And in that choice, you'll find a version of yourself you almost forgot existed. Calm, clear, powerful. Unapologetically whole. Let them avoid. You reclaim. One of the most disorienting parts of being with an avoidant ex is the way their distance becomes a constant psychological weight. It's not just about what they're doing or not doing. It's about how much space they take up in your head, even after they're gone. You could be at work, at dinner, on a walk, and suddenly their silence creeps in like static. It's haunting. And that's what we need to talk about. What happens when that distance, that emotional push-pull stops owning you? Because here's the thing, people with avoidant tendencies often aren't trying to hurt you on purpose. Most of them are acting out unconscious patterns rooted in early experiences where closeness felt unsafe, overwhelming, or conditional. So now, as adults, the minute intimacy feels real, they retreat, they disconnect, and the more you chase them, the more they shut down. This creates a toxic loop. You crave connection, they crave space. You take their withdrawal personally, as if your worth is being measured by how long it takes them to text back. And over time, you start managing their distance instead of managing your own boundaries. Let's pause here. That sentence is important. You start managing their distance instead of your boundaries. That's the moment you lose yourself. You start calibrating your words to avoid scaring them off. You silence your needs to keep them close. You read their behavior like a code you can crack if you're just patient enough, low maintenance enough, lovable enough. But you can't negotiate with someone's nervous system. You can't beg someone into intimacy when their default is to avoid it. So what actually happens when you stop caring? When you stop letting that emotional distance destabilize you? First, you stop assigning meaning to the silence. It's no longer a signal that you're too much or not enough. It's just silence. It's just who they are and how they operate. You begin to recognize that their emotional unavailability isn't a reflection of your value, but a reflection of their capacity. And that shift right there, that's liberation. It's like a fog lifts. You're no longer trapped in reactive mode, waiting for validation. You stop checking your phone, hoping for the tiniest sign of attention. You stop playing chess with someone who's not even showing up to the board. And suddenly, you have all this mental and emotional space. You're free to use your energy on things that actually nourish you. That's when the real transformation begins. When their distance no longer stings, you regain your internal equilibrium. You become less anxious, more grounded. Why? Because you're no longer outsourcing your stability to someone who can't meet you where you are. You stop participating in the emotional scarcity game, and you start creating your own abundance. And let's go deeper on a philosophical level. This is a confrontation with your own fear of abandonment. That fear is what kept you in that cycle for so long. It's what made their withdrawal feel so unbearable. But when you stop letting their distance mean something about your worth, you reclaim a sacred kind of autonomy. You realize, I can be with myself. I can hold myself. I don't need to chase someone who can't hold me in return. And the irony, that's usually when they start to notice. When you emotionally unplug, when you stop playing the role of emotional caretaker, the avoidant X often senses the shift. You're not reactive anymore. You're not emotionally dependent on their breadcrumbs. That energy, that detachment, it's magnetic. But by then, you'll be in a very different place. You won't be starving for their attention. You'll be full on your own terms. Here's a practical takeaway. Start noticing when your thoughts spiral around their absence. Instead of reacting, pause and ask yourself, what am I trying to feel right now that I think they would give me? Is it reassurance? Is it validation? Is it connection? And then find a way to give that to yourself. Because once you realize that you can meet your own emotional needs, their distance becomes irrelevant. You're not avoiding vulnerability. You're embodying strength. That's the emotional maturity that ends the cycle. So when you stop caring about your avoidant ex, what really changes isn't them. It's you. You stop being affected by emotional volatility that was never yours to carry. You stop feeling the need to fix or prove. You become emotionally self-sufficient, not in a defensive, walled-off way, but in a deeply centered, powerful way. Their distance loses power the moment you stop giving it meaning. Let that sink in. Because when you master that, you stop orbiting around people who can't meet you, and you start building a life that reflects what you're truly worth. When you're wrapped up in the emotional whirlwind of an avoidant partner, clarity is the first casualty. You can't see straight. You're too busy riding the highs of rare intimacy and the lows of frequent distance. One moment, you're convinced this person cares deeply, but just doesn't know how to show it. The next, you're wondering if you imagined the entire connection. That confusion, that's what keeps you stuck. But when you finally stop caring, when you begin to detach from the cycle, you also begin to see. And that's not just about seeing them. It's about seeing you, the dynamic, the patterns, the truth of what was actually happening. Because let's be honest, during the relationship, most of us are not looking at reality. We're looking at potential. We're projecting hope. We're attaching to a version of the person we want them to become. And it's easy to do that when someone is avoidant because they give you just enough to keep the illusion alive. A kind message here, a soft look there. Just enough to fuel the belief that if you love them harder, if you're more patient, if you just wait it out, they'll finally show up. But love based on potential is not love. It's fantasy. It's a contract you signed without the other person even agreeing to show up. And that's what changes when you stop caring. The fog lifts. You're no longer operating from anxiety or longing. You're operating from observation. You start to notice the patterns you ignored. The mixed signals. The constant emotional distance you kept explaining away. The way you were walking on eggshells just to keep things calm. You realize that you were investing in the hope of connection more than the reality of connection. It's a hard truth to sit with, that what you thought was love was, in many ways, a one-sided emotional labor. You were the one initiating conversations, trying to resolve conflict, carrying the emotional weight of the relationship. And now that you've stepped back, you can finally ask yourself, was that really love? Or was it a coping mechanism? There's a concept in psychology called cognitive dissonance. It's what happens when your actions don't align with your beliefs, so your brain tries to reconcile the difference. In relationships, this often looks like justifying bad behavior because admitting the truth would hurt too much. They're just busy. They've been through a lot. They're trying in their own way. But when you're no longer emotionally invested, that dissonance fades. You no longer need to protect the fantasy. You're free to see what's actually there. And this isn't about demonizing your ex. It's about radical honesty. It's about accepting that sometimes people don't have the tools to love you the way you deserve to be loved. That doesn't make them evil, but it also doesn't make them right for you. You can have compassion and clarity at the same time. You can understand their wounds without making their behavior acceptable. And here's the beautiful part: clarity leads to healing. You stop blaming yourself for the failure of the relationship. You stop wondering what more you could have done, because now you understand you were never the problem. You were simply trying to connect with someone who was emotionally unavailable, and no amount of effort on your part was ever going to override their avoidance. That was their work to do, not yours. And when you see it clearly, something inside of you shifts. You stop replaying the past through a lens of regret or longing. You start moving forward with wisdom. You become more discerning, more grounded. You raise your standards, not out of spite, but out of self-respect. This kind of clarity is earned. It doesn't come from time alone. It comes from emotional detachment, from finally stepping out of the story long enough to see the plot line for what it really was. Not a romance, but a lesson. Not a failure, but a mirror. You start to recognize that this experience, as painful as it may have been, revealed something essential: what you will no longer tolerate, what you now value in love, what kind of relationship you're ready to build next, not with fantasy, but with facts, not with fear, but with fullness. And that kind of clarity, it's priceless. It doesn't just free you from the past, it prepares you for something better, because you're no longer looking backward, trying to fix what broke. You're looking forward, finally ready to receive the love that doesn't need fixing at all. When the illusion falls away, the truth sets you free. And once you see clearly, you never go back. When you finally stop caring about your avoidant ex, when you reclaim your power, detach from their distance, and see the relationship for what it really was, something powerful and almost paradoxical happens. You create space. And I don't mean space in the abstract, poetic sense. I mean literal psychological, emotional, and spiritual room in your life. Room that was once occupied by anxiety, rumination, emotional labor, and hope that someone would change. Room that was clogged by the mental gymnastics you performed just to feel safe with someone who was never truly present. When all of that falls away, You're left with something people don't talk about enough: space for something healthier to enter. Let's talk about what that really means. Because you can't attract or receive a healthy relationship when you're still mentally tethered to a dysfunctional one. If your nervous system is still attuned to chaos, if you're still subconsciously equating love with longing, you'll end up chasing the same dynamic in a different body. That's how patterns repeat. That's why people find themselves in the same relationship over and over again, just with a new face. The cast changes, but the script stays the same. So stopping the care, the fixation, the emotional pull isn't just a matter of moving on. It's an act of energetic alignment. You are recalibrating your internal compass. You are saying to yourself, I will no longer invest in what drains me. I will only create space for what nourishes me. And that declaration changes everything. Here's the psychology behind it. Our attachment patterns, how we connect with others, are often shaped in childhood, and unless we become conscious of them, we reenact them in adulthood. If you've been drawn to avoidant partners, it's likely because some part of you internalized love as something you have to earn. Love meant proving yourself, working, shrinking. So when someone comes along who is stable, consistent, emotionally available, it might not even feel exciting. It might feel foreign, even boring. That's not because they're wrong for you. It's because your nervous system hasn't yet learned how to feel safe with safety. But when you stop caring about the avoidant ex, you're doing more than letting go of one person. You're letting go of the old template, the one that kept you stuck in cycles of emotional starvation. And in that letting go, you begin rewriting your story. You start asking different questions. How do I want to feel in a relationship? What kind of connection am I actually available for? What part of me used to be attracted to inconsistency? And what part of me is ready to outgrow that? And here's the most beautiful part: healthy love thrives in that new space. Because here's the truth. Healthy love isn't confusing. It isn't hot and cold. It doesn't leave you questioning your worth or decoding silence or shrinking yourself just to maintain someone's comfort zone. Healthy love is steady, present, available. It's built on mutual care, not emotional hunger. And while it might not have the same dizzying highs of the avoidant cycle, it also doesn't come with the crushing lows. It's not addictive because it's not a scarcity game. It's secure and therefore sustainable. And yes, it might feel unfamiliar at first. You might even find yourself resisting it. But that's where the work begins. That's where you teach your nervous system, your heart, and your mind that consistency is not boring, it's safe. That calm is not a lack of passion, it's peace. That being deeply seen and supported isn't something you have to earn, it's something you're already worthy of. But again, none of this happens if you're still holding on to the fantasy of your avoidant ex. The space has to be cleared. And not just physically, emotionally, mentally, energetically. Because space is a signal. It tells the universe, your subconscious, your future partner, I'm ready now. I'm no longer chasing what hurt me. I'm choosing what heals me. And let's be clear, this doesn't mean you need to be fully healed before love can find you. Healing is never linear, and it's never complete. But it does mean you're no longer available for relationships that require you to betray yourself. It means you're rooted enough in self-respect that your time, your energy, and your heart are only invested in places that honor them. That shift, it's not just personal, it's transformative. It changes the way you date, the way you speak, the way you love, and most importantly, it changes the way you love yourself. When you stop caring about the person who couldn't choose you, you start choosing the life that will.